Yeah, we are live now, Jim. Thank you very much for joining. And I thank you, everyone who is on call with us. I have Coach Jim Johnson, and it is my pleasure and honor to have him on this podcast. To introduce Jim, I would say that he is an authority on subject called realizing your dreams and leadership. Realizing your dreams is very important for all of us, whether we are entrepreneurs, business owners, small and medium businesses, or personal coaches, or personal or for our personal lives, even if you are not in business. Now, when I read about Coach Jim Johnson, I realized that he has rolled his accomplishment and experiences for the last a few decades and into two main topics. And one is that dreams really do come true, and leadership lessons from half court. And I'll go deep into all these things. But our top, and he has been delivering these messages and leadership lessons to various organizations, businesses across the country. And Jim, I would like you to add to what I didn't speak about you. Would you like to tell more about it?
Oh, sure. So well, first of all, thank you, Sandeep. Great to be part of this podcast today. And yeah, I was a high school coach for 30 years, and head coach is 30 years. And so from there, I learned a lot of different life lessons, and probably the most unique situation was that we got an opportunity to work with a young man that was on the autism spectrum. His name was Jason McElwain. The world now knows him as JMac. And he tried out for our team 3 consecutive years. He never made the team, but he served as our team manager. And I got very close to him. And I just admired his resilience. I admired his ability to give first. He was always trying to help our team in any way he could. And so his senior year, when he didn't make the team and he was going to serve as our manager, I told him I want to give him a gift. And the gift was for our final home game, which we call senior night. We honor the seniors. I want to give him a uniform so he can uh, be in uniform like the rest of the seniors. And he was really excited about the uniform. As I kid people, he would periodically ask me about that uniform. And of course, I defined periodically as about every other day. He was pretty fired up. Well, interesting, that season we're expected to have a really good team, but we had a lot of turmoil that kind of divided the team. And Jason was kind of our rock that kind of brought us back together through some thick and thin times during the season. And when the final home game came, uh, I put him in with about 4 minutes to go, and the place just exploded when he walked on the floor. And what I didn't know was one of our parents had made all these placards, these pictures of Jason's face, and put them on paint sticks, and he gave them to the student body to show when he entered the game. Well, I did not know this, and Jason didn't. And I got so overwhelmed with emotion, I sat down, which I rarely did in games, and tears started to roll down my face. So the game starts with the first time Jason's ever been in the game. He gets his first shot, a 3-pointer from the right corner. He lets it go, and it misses by like 6 feet. And I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying, dear God, please help him get one basket. Well, next possession, he gets a much shorter shot. And this time it hits the rim. So I'm like, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. And then the third time was the charm. He shoots a 3-pointer, it goes in, and the place just explodes. I'm thinking, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, but he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get even better than this. But it did. For the next 3 minutes, Jason's idol was the late, great Kobe Bryant. And he actually turned into Kobe. For the next 3 minutes, he just making shot after shot. And when the final buzzer it sounded, he actually made a 3-pointer at the buzzer, and he ended up being our leading scorer with 20 points, including 6 3-pointers. And it was just, I was fortunate to be part of a lot of winning games and a lot of championships, but nothing ever touched my heart and soul. And I'll wrap up this piece by saying 5 months later, Jason was up for the ESPY, which is the ESPN Awards, and he was up for the greatest sports moment of the year. And one of the other finalists was his idol, Kobe Bryant. So he meets Kobe because Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game, and he actually beats out his idol for the ESPY.
Awesome, awesome. Very, 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 very powerful story. And I actually watched JMac's story on ESPN and on YouTube. So I would encourage our listeners to go and search JMac ESPN story on YouTube, and you'll see what he did in a matter of 4 minutes and how it changed. I think that moment not only changed the life for him. I think it has impacted the life of many, many people, and you take that message, are taking that message across the world, even in the business world now. So my question now is, we talked about JMac. What lessons did you learn from that story, which can be applied to us and the small and medium businesses also?
Well, I think the great thing, because like starting a business, you're going to have a lot of trials and tribulations. And, I know the research shows that many small businesses start out with all great intentions, but don't make it. And so the first lesson that I really learned, I think we can learn in any endeavor, including business, is the art of perseverance. Jason never gave up on his dream, and the fact that he kept trying and gave his best every day. And the second lesson I would say is the idea of service first. That even though Jason wasn't a member on our team, he was a member of our program, serving in another capacity as a manager. And he did that to the best of his ability. And he took a lot of pride in what he did. And he wanted to be a contributor to help our team be successful. And I think that's something we can all learn, is not all of us are going to be the star, but we all have a role on a team, and a business team is no different. And do that role to the best of the ability, and be ready when your opportunity, which leads into the third lesson I'll share, and that's what I call carpe diem. And that's the ability to seize the moment. And Jason was ready. He had put in extra time in shooting and getting ready. So when he did get his chance, certainly he flipped. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. You never know when your opportunity is going to be there, but when it is, you got to be ready for it.
No, I thank you very much for sharing that. Another thing, what I read on your website as well as in your bio, that you have been talking about 7 leadership keys that can be applied for our entrepreneurs, business owners, and CEOs and all that. So may I know a little bit about that?
Sure. So the 7, first one is called clarifying your vision. And that's getting clarity of the direction, developing a mission statement, which I think we should have a personal mission statement and a team mission statement or an organizational statement. Number 2 is building trust. And I think it's so essential. No one doesn't believe that trust isn't important in a team of any kind, whether it's business, athletics, whatever. But it's really important that you have a plan of how you're going to build trust. Number 3 is creating an edge. I think leaders should be always growing themselves so they can find ways to add opportunities for their team and develop the team members to be leaders. I think that's a great way to create an edge. Number 4 is effective communication. And I think that's really the ability to have clarity of what you say and align your words and actions. And secondly, to become a better listener. I think too many times the leadership, we think we have all the answers, and most of the time we don't. We've got to be ready and be willing to listen to our team members to get the best answer, not necessarily your answer. Number 5 is what I call lead by example, which is simple in process, but often not done very well. And we always talk to our players that you are always on stage, that people are always watching you. And I know as a leader, your team members are all watching you. So if you say one thing and do something different, like a simple example, if I say we need to start practice at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I come stumbling in at 6:15, I've sent a really poor message to my team. The 6th key is what I call leaving a profit. And I think all leaders should develop a leadership philosophy. And my philosophy was leave a profit. And simply that meant that everything we touched, we wanted to make better, not worse. And I always give a simple illustration, like when we would go play at another team's school, when we would walk in the locker room, if I saw a piece of trash on the floor, I would pick it up and throw it out. because every place we go, we want to make it better, not worse. And even though I didn't leave the trash there, I was sending a message to my team that we want to make everybody better, that we get involved with, not worse. And then the last one is something that's been talked a lot in recent years in leadership, and that's servant leadership. And that's the ability to flip the pyramid. So now the leader is actually serving all the team members and having that mindset. And the other side of that, I think, is so important, is I think great leaders are teaching their people how to lead themselves and how to lead others and how to influence people by being a good leader.
Okay, no, thank you very much. And I want to go dig deep into one thing which has, in my experience as an employee of organizations for 25 years in the corporate world, I saw many missions and visions and all that in the and people were trying to distill that thing in our minds, and I used to always distaste that because they were so superfluous. We want to be the best customer service organization in the world and all that, and nothing in the organization speaks about it.
Right.
Do you think an organization should create a mission statement, as well as how they can create it, as well as from a personal level, how we can create it for a personal mission statement?
So let's start with the organization last mission first. So in developing a mission, I think it does start with one person with a vision. I think it's hugely important. They see this all the time. I agree with you. I go to businesses and they have a mission statement. But first of all, most people don't know what it is. And secondly, they don't really understand, what is the mission and are we living on a daily basis? So I always teach leaders that I think you should be not the CEO, you should be the CRO. What does that mean? You're the chief reminding officer. So you got to consistently live the mission, share the mission, and make sure everybody knows the mission. And one of the things in developing that mission statement, did you get feedback from your people and get buy-in from them so there's clarity on the mission? And then secondly, understanding how to live the mission. I think that has a lot to do with what are your top 3 core values, and does everybody understand them, and are you living them consistently? Moving on to your own personal mission statement, I think that's something that does take a discovery phase. And what I teach people to do is, the first thing is, I think a great question to ask yourself is, why were you put on this earth? Or if you believe in a higher power, it could be, why did God put you on this earth? But the bottom line is, I think that's a great question to contemplate and to think about. And I think you should just take some quiet time and think about, why was I put on this earth? Then I think the second piece to that I teach people is, what are your 3 most important values? And once you get clarity of that, then trying to put it into a 1 or 2 sentence statement that you have clarity, and then you try to live by each day. And no one's perfect, so you're certainly going to have better days and worse. But example, like my mission statement is to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. So when I know that I lead by example, I'm a servant person first, and I can find ways to help serve people to overcome their challenges, to make their dreams come true, then I know I'm living my mission. And everybody's mission could be, the last thing I think about mission is it should be something that you're passionate about, and it also has a service mindset. I think if you have a great personal mission statement, it's something where you're helping people become better in some way, or the world better, whether it's something you want to overcome pollution, whatever your mission. There's no right or wrong mission, but I think it should be in the line of service of making the world a better place.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to share my mission statement, which I have mentioned on my personal website, sandeepdal.com, that I want to positively impact 50 million people in my life. And every day when I wake up, I think I have that moment in my life and say, what should I be doing today to add on to that list? It's a big list, but to add on to that list. And what I think is that with my businesses, with my coaching, with my podcast, with my consulting, or any time I meet somebody, if I am able to make a one positive impact in the life of one person through any of these events, it may add up to the list. I'm not keeping a track of it. God is.
Yeah.
But I that's the higher goal I have, and that, somebody out there may be making a balance sheet and giving me karmic points of what I'm doing,
Yeah.
but I that's what my belief in, and that's keep me going. And I
Great.
think with new products coming up, and I am, like, I'll give you an example. I'm also an advisor to a wildfire management aerial mapping company, and that company has a unique technology with which we uh, do the aerial mapping, and we provide solutions and solve the wildfire problem, and extinguish it much faster. So I think with that impact also is a very positive. So I understand what you're saying, and uh, I wanted to say that with my example, that this is the kind of mission I have. And thank you very much for sharing what you shared. One question I have, and I read out on your website, it said you believe in building and sustaining championships cultures, and the most important point I thought about that was that you believe it is a combination of art and science. I want to dig into that combination of art and science, and how do you get the perfect balance of art and science in that?
That's a great question. And so I think, first of all, the sciences, I think there are a lot of studies about different things on building teams. And I think you should be very cognizant of learning as much as you can about what works with working with people, what doesn't work. But I think there's also an art because people are so fascinating and there's so many different dynamics with each person. So I think the art is the ability to build relationships with people so that you get an understanding of what makes each person tick. What are the triggers that motivate? Because what one person is motivated by doesn't motivate another person. And I think that's something that's a real key as a leader. One of the things I teach leaders is when you do some type of team goal session, and you write them down, you have clarity. I believe then the second step for the leader is then using the science piece and also the art piece is getting to meet with your team members individually and say, okay, here are our team goals. What are your individual goals and how do they sync with the team goals? And how can I best support you in accomplishing your individual goals as we work together as a team to accomplish our team goals? So I think there's really an art and a science in the getting clarity of understanding systems that work, which are more the science, and also the art of really getting to know each person at a deeper level so you can help build a a real bridge and not a wall between you and team members.
Awesome. And another thing which I wanted to ask you was you mentioned that there is a delicate cycle in taking top performing workers and placing them into the leadership positions. And I understand from your posts that you have been saying, and you have a process for that. But I want to add before that, I want to give you two things which is happening in the Silicon Valley or in the tech world these days. One, that when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he went and said, he went and asked and said, why are there so many people here? How many of these people are critical? And the one thing which he wanted to check was to figure out, how many of these thousands of employees have actually touched the code, and if he touched the programmer code, and if he then found out that anybody who has not touched the code for last 6 months, and he calls himself or herself as a manager or a director or a VP or something, should be let go because he didn't want all those extra layers of unnecessary people. Now that's one thing. And then Facebook recently came up with 11,000 people layoff, and most of them, he says, Zuckerberg said that is going to be the people who are not individual contributors, and he wants to remove the extra layers of managers and all that. So looking at all this, I realize what you're saying is a delicate cycle. And when we take over, I'm taking a question is related to that I have a top performing person in my team. He or she has a aspiration of becoming a manager or a lead. Now, if I take him or her and put her into a managerial position with a more administrative tasks, how do we manage that delicate balance? What do you think about that?
That's a great question because we see it a lot in business, especially with a successful salesperson, male or female, that becomes really good at selling, a product or service, and does a great job in building relationships with clients. But then all of a sudden, because often in business, the promotion is, and now instead of being a salesperson, it's now leading a sales team. All right, that seems to be a typical promotion. Well, the problem with that is it's a different skill set and a different mindset. When you're a great performing salesperson, what you are really focused in on a certain set of skills, and you can develop those really well. When you are become the manager of a team, now it's a different set of skills, and things like now the success is based on how you can inspire and clearly communicate, the objectives for the team to help them be successful, building relationships. Whereas when you're a salesperson, yes, you build some relationships with your clients, but you don't necessarily have to build a lot of relationships with the team.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're the leader of the team, you better build relationships with all your team members, get understanding of what triggers them, what motivates them, how you can best support and coach them. I think those are things that are really important. And often we want to be promoted because status, also certainly usually increase in salary. But at the same time, if we're not helping that person with that transition by sharing, now it's a different mindset. There's also different skills you got to learn. Otherwise, you're going to fail because we see people flounder all the time. In my profession, when I was coaching basketball, there was very good assistants, but all of a sudden, when they became the head coach, they really struggled because they didn't realize in the transition there was some other mindset, there's some different skill set, and they didn't learn those, and therefore they ended up failing. So I think it's really important that yes, you can make the transition from assistant to a head coach, or as a very good salesperson to a sales manager, but understand that each role has a different set, both mind and skill. And if you're not open to learning that, and the last thing I think is really important, I believe effective leaders are curious. They're always asking questions of themselves. How can I get better? And they're always asking questions of their team members to help them get better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to go deeper into the employee and how we can transform them, how we can make them move from just being a bench warmer or somebody who is just, a body there to just, or I call that an envelope pusher. You do what you are just told. Otherwise, you're just busy in your own world and you're not even putting in an extra effort or even the required effort to move the organization forward. I always felt that it may be a misalignment of goals or maybe something else. What do you think, apart from misalignment of goals, and if it is true, what else should be there, and what should we do to make them a transformational team rather than from just an envelope pusher or a bench warmer?
Well, I think there's a lot to that question. It's a great question. So I think the first thing is what's your process of getting the right people on your team? So I think getting clarity, making sure that you're checking references, you have good interview questions that are along with your mission and values, I think is where it does start. Now, certainly there are still people that can interview very well. You hire them and you realize maybe they're not the person they said in the interview. Now, from there, I think there's a couple things. Number one, I think you've got to be a consistent model for your team members. So again, if you expect them to be really hard workers and you come in an hour later than everybody else, you leave early, you're sending a really poor message. So I think modeling and leading by example is important. Secondly, we've talked about this, but I can't emphasize it enough, is you need to build relationships. And in doing that, I think you need to do some one-on-one meetings. I think they're really powerful. You talked about alignment of goals. I think that's a really important concept, that you must understand what really makes them tick, what does motivate them, what are their goals. And then I think it's really important to have short one-on-one check-ins where you ask simple questions like, uh, what are you working on, John, today? What is the best way that I can support you while you do this? And then periodically ask them, hey, John, how's the job going right now? Where do you see yourself 2 years from now? So you're trying to dig in of where do they see where they're moving forward, and finding out, I think is really important. And you got to be consistent on that day in and day out. And once you build a relationship, there are sometimes still people don't fit in, and you can help them maybe go into a different position, or maybe you find them another career sometimes, is because when you're working with people, I think the bottom line is you're trying to help them be successful, and it might not be working on your team, and sometimes you got to realize that. But certainly, I think you get developing a process of getting the right people on your team, as Jim Collins always said, getting the right people on your team, and also getting them in the right seats. And I think that's something as a leader, you've always got to be observing and learning about that.
Yeah. So thanks, Jim. And I wanted to encourage the listeners to leave a comment or ask questions. And you will not be able to come and speak on this platform, but I will be able to see your messages if you message on whatever platform you are on right now, like LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter, because we are live on these three platforms. So send a message and I will read through it and ask Jim your questions. Now, Jim, we are going through a very tough economic situation these days in the world, and especially in America. There's a lot of discussions going on recession and whether it is already in recession or it will be or whatever it is. Now SVB Bank has also fallen here in the Silicon Valley. Surprising, the entire bank folded up in 2 days or something. It's surprising. So in that light, when we have challenge, change, chaos has become the order of the day in our personal and professional lives and business lives, it is leading us to stress and anxiety and even healthy issues. So what do you think? How these entrepreneurs and business owners and business CEOs can stand and equip themselves, and they stand tall and strong to face these things and overcome them and move on to the better stuff in the future?
Yeah. Well, I think number one is something I learned because I was not very good early in my career as a leader, is you got to be the calm in the storm. And I'll give you an example in my world, coaching basketball. When we played our postseason tournament, everything gets more intense, kind of like when you go through a tough time in business. And early in my career, I would always fall apart. I would start yelling at people. I would not be the same person I normally was during the rest of the year. And I think that's really important, is when you go through tough times, what I learned, and it helped us win a lot of championships the second half of my career, was I've got to be the rock when adversity strikes. I've got to be the person that's going to be calm, and that I'm going to learn. And then the second phase is I can't emphasize enough that you got to build relationships with your people so that you build that trust. And I always talk about 3 keys in building trust. Number one is you got to consistently align your words and actions. So if you're saying one thing and you're doing something different, you're sending a mixed message. And when tough times happen, if trust gets broken, that's really hard to regain. Number 2 is I think you got to really base your business or your team with the idea that you're going to tell each other the truth. And when you've got to be, as a leader, seeing when things aren't going well, you got to be willing to share that with your people and get their input. Because one of the things I did much better the second part of my career, and I think leaders, is you got to find out what the best solution is, not necessarily your solution. So you got to be open to feedback from your people. And so they feel like they're heard. And something I always used to tell my team members is I always want to hear from you. And again, telling the truth, sometimes I say, you know what, John, thank you for your input. I don't agree with what you're saying, and here's why. Now, they may not like that comment, but at least they knew where I stand rather than the leader that says, oh, thanks, and then just moves on and doesn't do anything about it. I think that frustrates people more than anything. People want to know the truth, they want to know where they stand. And when you go through hard times, they know that they can trust you because you will tell them the truth. And then the third thing is, I think you got to consistently catch people doing the right thing. And when you do that, more than critical, although I think there are times you need to criticize. But as a leader, if you keep that mindset that I've got to catch people doing right, so and reinforce that with specific praise, then I think it really again helps to build the trust. Because when you build trust and you consistently build it, and you're the consistent force, you're the calm in the storm, then people are going to trust you when the hard times happen, which, you know what, we all know in any endeavor, there's going to be tough times. And as a leader, I think that's something you got to be prepared for. And again, I think the one thing that's hugely important going to the trust is being authentic with people, is that sharing right now, like, COVID, nobody went through that. So if you came in and said, hey, I got all the answers how we're overcoming the COVID, you know what? They're not going to believe you because no one's gone through that. That's where you got to step up and say, you know what? I don't have the answers right now, but we're going to figure this out together in a calm way. We're going to work on this together and we're going to get through this, and be very careful and cognizant of things you share. Like if you come out and say, we're not going to lay off anybody, and then 3 weeks later you lay off 50 people, oh, your credibility has gone down. So that's where you got to say, hey, right now, a better approach, in my opinion, would be to come in and say, you know what? The way our business is going right now, in a short period of time, we're going to have to start laying people off. What is some ways that we can figure this out together? And some people will say, hey, I'm willing to take a pay cut. As a leader, I think you start and say, I'm willing to take a pay cut right now to help us go through this difficult time. Because there's usually a better way that we can do it where we don't have to lose people. Sometimes that's not possible, but people really respect when you're authentic and truthful with them, and when the tough times come, they know what you stand for. And so, if you come in and say, we're going to get through this, we're not going to lay anybody off, better not make that statement. If 3 weeks later you're laying off a bunch of people. So
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And before we end the podcast, I want to ask you another thing. So we have gone through various questions today, and I think I also wanted to cover, say, 10 questions all leaders should be able to answer. I think we covered a few of them, but do you think if we have left something and you can add on to a couple of more?
Sure. So that's one of the other talks I do. And I think leaders, the first person you got to lead is yourself, of course. And we've heard that, but often we don't do a very good job of leading ourselves. So, like, one of the questions, one of the 10 is, do you have an intentional personal growth plan? Because most people think it is important to grow, but they're not very intentional and they're kind of hodgepodge, and those people don't tend to grow. So I do have a personal growth plan. I feed my mind. I'm a little anal, so I feed my mind at least 75 minutes every day. And what I found is that I do that with a few different things. I start the day every day by reading a minimum of 10 minutes. So I try to read a book a week. I don't always get through that, but most weeks I do, because I start my day and I usually end my day by reading for 10 minutes. Number two is I find different ways, what I call a 2-for-1. So if I'm out for my morning walk, I will listen to something that's usually educational. I'm a big podcast guy. I have my own podcast called the Limitless Leadership Lounge. We help young and emerging leaders. But I listen to a lot of podcasts to try to improve my expertise. I love finding things that inspire me, finding things that teach me how to be a better leader, or how to build better team culture. Those things really fascinate me. So those are things I study. because I think it's really important. If you want to be great in anything, leadership or any other topic, you got to make it a study. And then the third thing is I always talk about, most of us as adults, we have a driver's license. Uh, if you're driving a car, turn your car into a library on wheels. I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, I listen to all different things while I'm driving around. It's another great way. And then the last thing I'll say for now is that I think it's important that you either hire a coach for things that interest you, or develop a mastermind group where you can learn from other like-minded people. Those are great ways to increase your knowledge, because I think the best leaders are consistently growing themselves.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing such wonderful wisdom. And I will anybody any questions? So please post. Otherwise, I think we can close the session for today. And I would like to invite you again to talk more and go deeper into different topics.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it immensely, Sandeep, and I look forward to continue our conversation. I love what you're doing as well.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. Nice meeting you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. My pleasure.
Bye.